Okay, for lesson 4, we're going to talk about 3 different properties. We're going to talk about the commutative property, the associative property, and the distributive property. So these are 3 different properties of multiplication that we will be talking about. The commutative property, if you notice, 9 times 5 equals 5 times 9. Here in the commutative property, all they do is flip-flop the problem, and there's no parentheses, okay? So if you can remember, commutative property, no parentheses, and they just flip-flop the problem around. Now, when you do 9 times 5 and 5 times 9, you're going to get the same answer. The associative property has parentheses, okay? And they kind of group it together, and then on the next one, they group another problem together. So here, the example 8 times 2 is in parentheses times 6. When you solved this problem, that means you would do what's in parentheses first. To change it, all they did was take the parentheses and grouped them to the next problem. So 8 times 2 times 6, but now my parentheses are around 2 times 6. So the associative property, you're just grouping both problems together, okay? And then in the distributive property also has parentheses, but they are taking this first number and making sure you multiply it with this number and you multiply it with that number. So this problem kind of changes, okay? So we have 4 times 7 plus 3. So this changes to, again, we want to take that first number and multiply it here and multiply it here. So we have 4 times 7 in parentheses and 4 times 3 in parentheses, and you put your plus sign in the middle. So if you were to solve this, you would do 4 times 7 and 4 times 3, and then add your 2 answers together. On the try this, they just want you to write the name of the property shown. So these examples will definitely help you do that. Okay, so we'll do a couple together. Number 1 is 5 times 2 times 9 equals 5 times 2 times 9. And I notice that my parentheses are here. And then on the second part, I notice that the parentheses are here. And if I go up to my examples, that is going to fit the associative property. They just moved the parentheses. So number 1 is an example of the associative property. Let's take a look at number 2. We have 1 times 3 equals 3 times 1. Okay, my first clue here is that this problem does not have parentheses, so it's going to match the commutative property. So when there's no parentheses, it's going to be commutative. On number 3, this is where we have to pay a little more attention. So on number 3, we have 3 times 2 plus 6. And my parentheses are around, a little pointer, get it on here. My parentheses are around the 2 and the 6. So I'm going to take this 3 and I'm going to, exactly what the name is, distribute it. Okay, so I want to take this 3 and distribute it to this 2 and distribute it to the 6. Okay, so you can see that they did that when they did 3 times 2 plus 3 times 6. So this is an example of the distributive. The distributive property. Okay, so when you see that they've actually kind of taken this apart and redistributed it, also we have two groups of parentheses here. So that would also be another clue that this is the distributive property. Okay? And then, so I did an example of each for you. So then you should be able to go ahead and figure out what the rest of these are, given a few examples here. Okay? On the next page, I was hoping I could make this a little bit bigger. There we go. I made this a little bit bigger. On number 9 through 12, we're going to rewrite the following problems using only the commutative property. So for 9 through 12, that means that we don't have to use any parentheses because it's the commutative property. Okay, so the commutative property, if you look back on your key idea, they just flip-flop the problem. So instead of 4 times 9, this is going to be, or instead of 9 times 4, excuse me, this is going to be 4 times 9. Instead of 6 times 7, I'm going to flip-flop it, and this is going to be 7 times 6. Again, the commutative property has no parentheses. On 13 through 16, we're going to rewrite the problems using the associative property. So this one does have parentheses, and we literally just have to take the parentheses and move it over. Okay? So you notice on the first one, problem 13, the parentheses are around 4 times 6. Okay, so I'm going to write it first, and then I'm going to move my parentheses. So this would be 4 times 6 times 2. I'm going to move the parentheses around 6 times 2. Again, you have to have the parentheses or it will not be correct, okay, for the associative property. Number 14, I'm just going to rewrite the problem 7 times 4 times 3. So I notice in problem 14 that the parentheses are around 7 and 4. I'm going to move them so they're around 4 times 3. And 17 through 20, they're going to rewrite the following problem using the distributive property. So this is the one that might take you a little more time because we are taking that first number and we are distributing it to the 2 and the 6. So it's going to look like this. So I'm going to do 3 times 2, and then that plus sign is going to be moved. And then I'm going to have 3 times 6, and then I'm going to add parentheses on both sides. Let me see if I can fix that. That should be 3 times 2 plus 3 times 6. Number 18, I have 2 times 3 plus 9. So I'm going to distribute the 2 to the 3 and the 9. So this is going to be 2 times 3 plus 2 times 9. So my parentheses are going to be around 2 times 3 and 2 times 9. And that is the example of the distributive property. And we do not need to do the reflect.